Got that first part? Here's the part two. I'm happy to hear, Nick, that that's your favorite niggin. It was I felt it was apropos since we have entered the 3 weeks. It is Imesh Kachech, and on Tisha B'Av we mourn for tragedies of the past, I guess of the moment as well. And so Imesh Kachech is on my mind that we should never forget. We should never forget. Oh, thank you, Toby. We have thankfully, I think the deepest Torah we have are the thousands of nigunim we've inherited from our ancestors. Those who might have spoken a different language or had a very different way of conversing than we do, and yet through the power of the melody, I think every Jew can connect, and that's one of my dreams of the Messianic era, is that every Jew can be connected through nigun, even as our values are diverse. So friends, thank you for being here for kindness class number 14, Dibbur Yafeh, speaking kindly as always. I hope to share a little Torah, and then I hope to open the conversation with you. So let's start with a little poll about how you think about Dibbur Yafeh in your own life. How do I relate to speech? Number one, I hate politically correct garbage. I just speak the truth as I see it. Number two, I try to speak carefully, but slip sometimes. Option three, I'm deeply intentional and sensitive with speech as a listener and speaker. You'll notice my change of tone of voice as I gave you the options. Okay, give you another moment here. All right, let's see our results. I think people had enough time. Nobody here says, I hate politically correct garbage. I just speak the truth as I see it. 89% say I try to speak carefully but slip sometimes. And 11% say I'm deeply intentional and sensitive with speech as a listener and as a speaker. Great. So this is one of these sessions that is just basic, simple truths. We all learned since we were 2 years old to speak nicely to others, right? And so there's no rocket science here to the ideas. And yet it's a meditation on something that each of us can be potentially more intentional about and use our voices for all the power of our voices for good. So here we go. Virtually every child is taught not to hit other children and to use kind words such as please and thank you. But few are taught the nuances of the full power of speech to destroy or redeem others, to tear down or build up. For the Talmudic rabbis, divine speech has enormous power. In the creation story, we see God speak and a world created. And so they teach in Pirkei Avot, the world was created through 10 statements. I just learned this with my daughter last night. The world was created through 10 statements. What do you mean? God should have just acted, create the world. Why create the world through speech? Human speech is to be used cautiously and creatively, modeled off of this divine speech. You want to find the highest discourse in the world? Go on Twitter. No. You want to beat Twitter? Look at the comment section on op-eds. The comment section of oh, you fool, you don't know anything you're talking about. The comment section of op-eds is the lowest form of human discourse in the history of the world. Occasionally you'll find a thoughtful comment, but generally it's just people with a lot of rage and posting anonymously. In any case, we're here to have a different conversation. Some rabbis teach that the above insight regarding creation was not merely a historical phenomenon of how God created the world, but is still in place today. Rav Chaim of Volozhin taught each one of God's statements during creation is the soul and life force of the thing that was created with it. Get it? The speech infuses life force into the creation. All the various species or types of that thing, as well as the mazalot, the constellation, right? When you say mazel tov, you're not saying congratulations. You're saying your constellations should be for the good, right? Mazel is constellations. So you're saying, it's a little bit saying like, you should be lucky. I mean, Jews don't believe so much in luck, right? But I mean, Jews believe in all kinds of things. So, but mazel tov, we're saying essentially the arrangement of the cosmos that lead to your fortune should be aligned well for you. That's what we're saying with mazel tov. And angels in charge of that thing are also brought into being through these statements, right? Speech is constructive. From the moment of the original creation throughout all of history until the present time, the word of God keeps all things in existence every moment and in all different situations. We are not sensitive to this phenomenon since we only see with physical eyes. Wow. Okay. So Onkelos is perhaps the most famous convert in Jewish history. That picture is not of Onkelos. That is of Adam, of course. Adam was probably brown skin or black skin. He probably didn't have curly orange hair, but who knows? Some artist made this cool looking Adam with some fruit above his head. Most art thinks the fruit was an apple they ate. It was probably not an apple. Christian mythology talks about apples. But whatever this, from this Eitz Hadat Tovera, this fruit that they ate from, in any case. Onkelos, this famous convert who translated the whole Torah, the great Talmudic era translator and commentator, translated the culmination of the creation of man episode. He translated Vayahi ha'adam lenefesh chaya, literally meaning man becomes a living being. He translates that verse in the creation story as man became a speaking being. Humans are beings of mind, body, and soul. But for Onkelos, it is our capacity for speech, which was so unique to our creation. Judaism is a very speech-oriented religion, as there is such heavy emphasis upon prayer, Torah study, and the ethics of speech. Rashi, following Onkelos' translation, emphasizes that the most significant difference between humans and other creatures is the power of speech. Now, we're not going to take a big tangent right now on animal speech. We know animals have the capacity for speech. We know some of it is very limited and some of it is very extensive and comprehensive and sophisticated. Nonetheless, no one has ever argued that their capacity for speech in any way lines up with ours. If you've ever been to an academic conference or read a dissertation, by the way, an academic conference is probably the most boring activity you could ever do in your life. Aglaya, no offense. Academic conferences, you know what they do? Here's how
none taken. Okay, right. Absolutely none taken.
So anyways, but if you go to these conferences or you read academic footnotes, you realize the enormous capacity for speech. Or if you take a spiritual approach, if you go to hospice and you look at a hospice worker or a counselor and you see how people use their speech to heal, the capacity for humans and speech is just remarkable. The Maharal expands on this idea, and he writes that the essence of a human is not found in body or in soul, but in our power of speech, since it's a place where body and soul meet. Get it? Body, soul, they meet in the capacity for speech, according to the Maharal. For the Maharal, like Rashi and Onkelos, it is the capacity, the statement made my day, great. It is the capacity for speech that makes us uniquely human. Angels have souls, but no bodies. Animals have bodies, but lower souls. But humans, through speech, play a unique role in the divine plan for creation. merging body and soul. Human speech, indeed a gift from the divine, has enormous power. We know, for example, that the spiritual union of a husband and wife, or any two getting married, is not completed until the verbal recitation of the Sheva Brachot, the 7 blessings under the chuppah. The Mishnah states over there in Tractate Kala, very few have studied Tractate Kala, a bride is forbidden to her husband until the Sheva Brachot are recited. Get it? So your that the wedding is actualized through speech and through a speech act connected to the ring. If I were performing a gay wedding, I would also engage the Sheva Brachot and would think of the Sheva Brachot also as the actualization of this moment. Also consider the power of Nadarim, verbal vows. The Torah teaches in Numbers, Moshe spoke to the heads of the tribes of Bnei Yisrael, saying, this is the thing that God has commanded. If a man takes a vow to God or swears an oath to establish a prohibition upon himself, he shall not violate his word. According to whatever comes from his mouth, shall he do. So I don't say, gee, damn it, but a lot of people think in public that is what it means to curse, to swear in the name of God falsely, gosh, damn it, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, I don't say that, but people say it, but that's actually not it. But what it really is making a vow which is bound up with a divine commitment. And through the power of speech, one becomes obligated to such a practice. There's a lot to say about the power of a vow. In fact, there's too much to say about it, so I'm not going to say very much. Similarly, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, wisely advised in Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes, it is better not to take a vow than to take a vow and not fulfill it, right? Today we love commitments. Oh, you're my best friend. Oh, I'm on a 6-month diet, right? Oh, I'm signing a lease. I'm signing a work contract. I'm getting married. But we know these commitments are very loose. They're very loose. I mean, the transience of the workplace, relationships that come and go, commitments, diets, don't even talk about diets. Apparently diets never work. I know we all love to try, including myself, but diets are empirically proven to be ineffective. Lifestyle changes. Now that's something that works, a lifestyle change, as opposed to a temporary diet. But so anyways, the neder, the rabbis are very opposed to us making verbal commitments. Unless we are very clear. So we don't just lose, we're taught to distrust people, say, oh, I promise you, tomorrow I got it. I commit to you, I'll never do it again, right? We're taught to be very skeptical of that, right? Of making such speech commitments in a sense. We reserve that for things like, I'm marrying you, that means I won't have sex with another person while I'm married to you, right? That's like a serious commitment to make. Like I swear on the Constitution that I'm not gonna lie in court, right? Or swear on the Bible, whatever, like we make very serious commitments, and that's like a very different moment than a loose commitment, okay? So there's many Jewish laws around Shmirat HaLashon, guarding the tongue as well. For example, we must avoid Lashon Hara, evil speech, and Rechilut, tale-bearing, as hard as that is. The Jerusalem Talmud couldn't make more clear how serious this is in rabbinic thought. It says over here in the Jerusalem Talmud, just a reminder, there's the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud, very different works, very different results, but they're both fascinating. There are 4 transgressions for which one pays in this world and in the next: idolatry, sexual immorality, and murder. And Lashon Hara is equivalent in severity to them all. Now, that's kind of scary because all of us fall short on a daily basis in how we use our speech. So I don't think they mean like a minor slip that we catch. I think they mean that one who lives a life with very loose speech, constantly putting people down, constantly destroying people with gossip, constantly using social media to attack people and they hate, people who essentially use speech to tear down. Psalms advises us that guarding our tongue from evil speech is the pathway towards life and blessing. It says here in Tehillim, in Psalms, who is the person who desires life, who loves days of seeing good? If this is what you desire, Guard your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. The Rambam, Maimonides, teaches about the damage of speech that causes shame or pain to another. This is from the Sefer HaMitzvot. So to remind us, the Rambam writes the Mor Nevuchim, the Guide for the Perplexed. That's his philosophy work. He writes his commentary on the Mishnah. That's very important. And he writes his Yad HaChazakah, or his Mishnah Torah, which is Book of Laws. But less known than those three is his Sefer HaMitzvot. Here where he is giving his Taryag HaMitzvot. He's doing something very radical. Because what did traditionalists believe? Mitzvot are about obedience to God. What did the Rambam believe as a rationalist? No, mitzvot have a purpose. Each mitzvah we do, there is a good we are trying to achieve. This is not about divine obedience, right? This is about trying to actualize a certain good. And so in Sefer HaMitzvot, he lists the 613 biblical mitzvot and explains the moral and intellectual reasons for them. So he explains here, we are instructed not to engage in onat devarim, causing emotional distress to each other with our words. This includes statements that cause another person pain, anger, or embarrassment. The source is in the Torah, in Vayikra, do not aggrieve your fellow and you shall fear your God. The Talmud tells us that the verse is referring to causing emotional distress with our words. Okay, so we might have said, I didn't harm anybody. I didn't steal their stuff. I didn't hit them. Verbal abuse is real. Verbal abuse is real, right? Verbal oppression is real. Violence through speech is real. But in addition to avoiding inappropriate speech, what about actively thinking about kind speech? Here we want to focus less on the lo ta'aseh, things we shouldn't do, of which there's an infinite list, but on the positive side. The Shem Shmuel teaches, according to Rabbeinu Yonah, if one guards their tongue and is careful about what they say, then their mouth is considered to be a holy vessel. Think about that, holy vessel, on par with the vessels used in the Mikdash, in the temple. Just like a holy vessel confers holiness upon whatever non-holy item is placed in it, so too all words that are issued from such a mouth are holy. Wow, how cool is that? Right, that we have a temple and we have these vessels in this Beit HaMikdash, and these are to contain holy things, right? So too, our mouth can be a holy place for what we eat, for what we speak, right? A place that holds our body. We think of what holding our body is like our feet, right? Our feet are like our foundation on the earth. But think of it as like our mouth holding up our body, our mouth holding up our soul, like this holy vessel that's containing the rest of our being. It is so easy to see the negative in everything and in everyone around us. Our brains almost seem hardwired to focus on problems and to think critically about everything and everyone. Rabbeinu Yonah further taught, however, that a righteous person will work to see the positive in everything. One of my friends here calls this a bullish market. And amongst upright people, so here we're quoting the Rabbeinu Yonah, and amongst upright people, one can find acceptance because a righteous person covers over people's shortcomings and always praises whatever is deserving of praise. It is related that once a wise person and another individual were walking together when they came across a carcass. The latter commented, "How disgusting is this carcass?" The wise person countered, "How white are its teeth?" Isn't that a cool Rabbeinu Yonah? By the way, I would love some eitzah. I would love some advice in our conversation. When I'm jogging and I pass a dead animal, I make a little shriek, a little 7-year-old girl shriek, and then I say a bracha, and I'm saying the wrong bracha. I'm saying Baruch Dayan Emet, blessed is the true judge, which you say when you hear that a human being has died. And I want to say something because I don't think we should encounter any death and be unshaken. You pass a death, I don't care, a bird flies in your window, you pass a dead squirrel or bunny on the sidewalk. I think we should say something. We should pause for, but I don't want to say the same thing that I say when a human dies, because I think there's a wall between animal dignity and human dignity. It may be a porous wall. It may be a tall wall, I'm not sure. But I want to say something. So maybe you have an idea of something I can say in Hebrew or English when I pass. For example, when I hear an ambulance or a fire truck or a police car, me and my kids, we say Baruch Rofei Cholim. Blessed is the healer of the sick, as if to like say a blessing that like, oh, you nurses, you firefighters, you police, you should be blessed to bring healing to where you're going. So we say that because we don't think we should hear a siren and say nothing. We should be spiritually responsive to the moment. Yeah, Agleya. So Baruch Dayan Ha'emet.
No, what I'm meaning is you could translate it when you say it for the animal into English because it's not exactly the same thing. Okay, so okay, I'm speaking from the linguistic term. Okay, ignore me. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I love the power of English prayer, but for me, like, and I wonder if there's other hearers like this. My neshama just relates very differently to Hebrew than English. If I read the Psalms in English, I'd be like, what is this Christian teaching? If I read it in English, you know. If I read the Psalms in Hebrew, I'd be like, oh, David HaMelech is awakening the Eibishter. You know, it's like, it's a very different experience for me to pray in Hebrew than English. Yeah. But I don't want to put down English prayer because of course God hears all prayers. So you can pray in Finnish. Is Finnish a language or Finlandish? What do you call Finnish?
I think it's Finnish.
What do they speak in Finland? Huh? Finnish?
Finnish. Okay.
Finnish.
So...
Okay, you can pray in God even hears Finnish. I don't want to offend any Finnish people here. God can even hear Finnish.
Well, I was just thinking it just changes it a little bit though, so it's not exactly the same though, but it is. Yeah. All right. Sorry.
Awesome. Okay, great. So how can we get there? How can we achieve this goal? For starters, we are implored to constantly remember one of the most central teachings of Jewish ethics. And this is actually our focus, I believe, next week. And you shall love your fellow as you love yourself. I am God. This is taught to be central principle of the Torah. So this is as Rabbi Akiva teaches. Similarly, the Talmud tells a fascinating story here in which is in Tractate Shabbat. Shalom Sesame. The story is told of a Gentile who approached Shammai. He said to him, convert me on the condition you teach me the entire Torah where I stand on one foot. Shammai pushed him aside with a building beam he had in his hand. The Gentile came before Hillel, and Hillel converted him. Hillel instructed him, what is despised by you, do not do to another. This is the entire Torah. The rest is explanation. Now go and study. And so we see here, once again, well, there's a lot to say here about conversion, but also when we get to the essence of what Torah is about and treating others well. The Sefer HaChinuch directly connects the above teaching to how we use our speech. And in Mitzvah 243, perhaps before seeing the good in all, though, we'll need to practice removing our anger and critique of all around us. The 20th century Musar teacher, Rav Wolbe, who we've quoted quite a bit, suggested the following formula towards achieving this goal. He wrote, we will train ourselves to be patient. We will fix a specific amount of time each day. For example, approximately 15 minutes, in which we will strive to bear with patience all that we see and hear, even when things may be upsetting to us, and even if they are hurtful to us, without losing our composure at all. In cases where it's necessary or obligatory to react, we will do so with measured, calm words without becoming overly emotional. I think I shared this last week that my 5-year-old daughter put me into spiritual paralysis before sleep by asking me, Abba, is it better for me at camp to get the sticker of kindness or the sticker of patience? And I said, oh, you just kept me up all night with your question. It is instructive to note that Rav Wolbe stresses the importance of improving our behavior towards others with small steps, right? Small steps. In all or nothing approach, I'm going to be the kindest person or not at all. To changing our behavior is not only not necessary, but usually never works. A healthy approach by which we can achieve our goal is to begin with a mere 15 minutes a day, increasing that time frame steadily. Imagine if, just like we had a 20-minute exercise routine, or we had an investment strategy for the week, if we had a 20-minute character development strategy. Here's my strategy to cultivate my kindness or my patience or to restrain my anger today. We can think more carefully about how we use our speech with others at home, socially, at work, in stores, and of course, on social media. We should create a plan each day for how we'll speak in ways that help others, comfort others, empower others, and bring dignity to others. Okay, we're moving towards a conclusion, but the contemporary author and educator Dasi Berkowitz, who we recently had at VBM, and she is, I don't normally share who one is married to, but you may know her from this work. You may also know her husband because he now is the new director or president of Pardes in Jerusalem. His name is Rabbi Leon Morris. Even though Pardes is pluralistic or non-denominational, it is normally associated with modern Orthodox educators, but Rabbi Leon Morris is a Reform ordained rabbi on the traditional side, to be sure. And his wife wrote this cool book called Becoming a Soulful Parent. And she shares an important teaching from the Sfat Emet about how we experience our voices and the voices of others. I could have just quoted the Sfat Emet, but I think she unpacks it really well. So I want to use her words from this cool book that I recently read. If you're ever in the VBM office and you want a copy of her book, we will give you one for free. There's a teaching by the Sfat Emet, a Hasidic master from the 19th century, on the difference between speech, Dibbur, and voice, kol. With speech, we can express ideas, feelings, and practical communication. We say, well done to a colleague, and I love you to our children. We also say firm words such as no, not now, when we want to set a boundary. Speech is important. It allows us to communicate. It's efficient, but it can also be insufficient. Words alone cannot convey the fullness of what we want to express. Then there is kol, the voice that comes in. Speech is generic, but each person's voice is unique. If I close my eyes, I can hear my grandmother's voice in its tone and sing-songy lilt. What is lilt? Is that a mistake or is lilt a word?
It is a word. It is a word.
Mm-hmm. What does lilt mean?
Okay, it's a way that well, just former singer here. Okay, though it's a pitch modulation. Okay, if that makes sense. Is that making sense to everyone? Yeah. The way that you are actually changing your pitch. Yeah. Anyway.
Very cool. Thank you. Good. Good. I've never heard that word. I mean, obviously, I read it the first time I read this book, and when I put it in here, but I guess I didn't look it up. Anyway, she continues. I can hear my grandmother's voice, its tone and sing-songy lilt. I can hear the voice of my younger daughter when she calls Ima, mommy, amid throngs of other children. Her voice is immediately recognizable. It's just her. Our voice, says the Sfat Emet, and the voice of those we love, is more than a thing to be cherished. It is redemptive. Only one voice sounds just like yours. Only one voice can sing your unique song. We can reflect not only on our Dibbur, the words we say and how we say them, but also on our kol, the unique authenticity that we bring to the speech that we articulate. Friends, let us use both our Dibbur and our kol, our power of speech and our unique voice, to bring our inner world into the outer world, to build up others and spread kindness. I would love to hear from you. Hi, Aglaya.
Hi. Okay. This is not exactly a happy story, so if it upsets anyone, I'm really sorry about that, though. But you're talking about the dieting and how dieting doesn't work and everything. The fastest way to get this out of here is that it started when I was 8, and it didn't stop until I was well into my 20s and everything. Officially, I didn't have one particular disorder, though. I've switched back and forth between disorders. Now, I tried to I remember when I was in college, the way that I tried to keep myself on the, instead of the cycle of starving, then binging and purging, then binging and keep gaining weight and losing weight and everything like that, though, was a lot of negative self-talk. So I don't know but a lot of negative self-talk can do that. So, yeah. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I probably should have given a trigger alert, even though most people don't do it when dieting conversation, but dieting really is a trigger for many people because of eating disorders or because of just enormous anxiety around body image, body weight, and the like. And it's never been more intense in the history of the world than it is here in 2022, for men and for women, well, obviously non-binary folks as well, and all the more so for women. But I did recently see a study that it's actually relatively equal. We would think women suffer from this more because of how the media portrays women constantly, but actually it appears that men suffer just about equally around this issue. I actually had a stat, maybe I'll include it in a future session, around this philosophical conversation around body mutilation, body mutilation, and the extent of what that can ultimately look like. And yeah, Aglaia is correct that obviously that this negative speech and how it's connected with this process as well, and how damaging that could be. So thank you for sharing that. Let's go to Lauren and then Eileen.
Not only tone of voice, but I found language is really interesting. English is very easy to be polite in. Try Hebrew, it's much, much more difficult. When I'd be on the bus, first of all, Israelis tend not to be, they're very direct, but I would say, Adoni, nala tetli lashevet, and I get a blank stare. And I try French and I try English. And it's just, some languages lend themselves more to being extremely polite. I think politeness is extremely, extremely important.
Yeah.
And you can really, really hurt a person badly by being rude.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. And just a basic reminder that's so helpful, just to think about just basic respect and politeness. I noticed this. I was in the grocery store on Sunday, and a man named Muhammad was bagging my groceries. And I noticed myself studying him, because in this area, we've received a lot of refugees from Afghanistan, obviously Syria prior to that. And because I noticed he didn't speak a word of English, so I gathered that he was here very recently. And also from his body language, his demeanor, it was very clear. But I noticed that it took me about 30 seconds of kind of studying him before I realized I hadn't said anything to him, right? And sometimes this rudeness and politeness is about what we're saying, but sometimes even the absence of speech, like, does this guy think I'm judging him? Does this guy think I'm, how I'm relating to him? And you're right. And in Israel, it's a very different relationship. And I do want to say, just to play devil's advocate a little bit, I have met many people in American culture who I think use politeness to kind of reveal their genuine kind nature. And I think I've met others who kind of use it to mask kind of a little bit of an apathy or mean nature. They're like, smiling, yes, thank you, but really they don't want to do anything nice at all. Like the politeness.
Into Louisiana.
Okay, yes. And so, yeah, there are some cultures that are a little bit passively aggressive where you speak nicely, but you're actually not interested in helping anyone. And when we say Israelis are sabras, what we mean is obviously prickly on the outside, sweet on the inside. They're not going to be very polite or nice on the outside. They're going to cut you in line. They're going to bump you on the way to the bus. They're not going to use very nice words. But in theory, they're going to be there if your car breaks down. Now, we may have different, experiences with that, this or that. And so I want to affirm that politeness is great and rudeness is bad, and kind of, raise the question of like, is our politeness, accompanied with a behavior that matches the words, or is the politeness kind of masking an apathy? Kind of we're using the politeness as an escape from actual having to be helpful. Yes, Eileen, and then Toby and Hannah.
It seems to me in terms of language and speaking, importance of how we talk to our children cannot be overemphasized, both in the words we use and in the tonality.
Great. Yeah, and I would say there, what Eileen is sharing is that it's not only in us modeling that, and the tonality as well, so powerfully said, but also it is an art and skill. We're not saying like, oh, here's a book to pick up with the 100 phrases we should use every day, right? Actually, there's an art and skill to using speech to actually, in a way, lift up others. It's not, there's no magical words, right? That goes back to the Sfat Emet of Kol versus Dibbur. Yes, there are nice words to say, but how do we deliver them in the right way, at the right time, in a way that's conjunctive rather than disjunctive? That's to say, connecting us rather than disconnecting us. And that is something, that emotional intelligence is something our children can learn from us modeling that. So thank you for that. Yes, and by the way, it goes without saying that going with kind speech, of course, is kind listening. Empathic listening is one of the great lost arts. I mean, not lost like it was once there, but lost in that like we wish it was there, right? But right, the empathic listening, even more powerful than powerful speaking, is just the ability to make somebody truly feel heard, and that is incredibly hard to do, very hard to do. Okay, Toby. Hi, Toby.
Good morning. I have some thoughts about having to relay bad news to someone. And in my job as a criminal defense attorney, a lot of times I would have to not only deliver bad news to my client, but to their families, who a lot of times had no clue about what their son or daughter was facing as far as the consequences for the behavior they had been accused of. And I learned a couple of tough lessons in trying to explain those things to the family, and spent a lot of sleepless nights, like you were talking about. I think about when people pose questions or pose, you have to balance. They need to hear this information because it's important in making a decision for their loved one and helping their loved one to make a decision about what to do. But how the way that this information is communicated to these people is really critical.
Yeah.
And nobody, I wasn't aware that there was a way to learn a sensitive way of, I read all the books and stuff, and I didn't find them very helpful in helping me to deliver bad news and to relay the fact that I was not only sympathetic, empathetic, and wanted them to be heard.
Yeah.
Anybody have any helpful hints on that score?
Yeah, love that. I would love when we open up the conversation to hear folks respond to that. I'll just share one or two things in addition to that. I think in addition to the legal field, we know medical providers also struggle with this. Obviously, to tell someone they have cancer, to tell someone they have 6 months left. And oftentimes doctors are critiqued for being particularly cold in their delivery and not having good bedside manners. They don't teach it so much in medical school or train it extensively enough. Obviously not in law school either, so much. Yeah, pastoral skills, right? And like the people in charge of the billing department want you to see as many patients as you can as fast as you can, right? Not to mention and lawyers as well, charging by the 10, 15 minutes, whatever the case is. And so take someone like my wife, who's a nurse practitioner in a women's health, in an OBGYN clinic. And she's got to be like, all right, I got 10 minutes with you and I got to tell you you're having a miscarriage and we need to remove the fetus, right? But I got 2 minutes left because I got to get to my next person because someone's watching me on the clock. Yeah, good luck. Like, yeah, you really want to, and this might be the kind of woman who's like, all right, I thought that was possible. I'm prepared. And this might be the kind of woman who's going to need an hour in the office to kind of hug someone and like, think through that, And so, yeah, this is serious stuff, and we've all encountered that. We've all encountered medical providers who feel like they have an emotional pulse, and those who felt like they didn't, and lawyers on the same front. And it goes beyond, and each of us has defense mechanisms. I know my first 5 years as a pastoral counselor, I had a terrible defense mechanism is not the right word. It's not really a tick. Somebody give me the right word. That I would, when I had to say something really, share something really bad or was in a very uncomfortable situation, I would smile, like a little smirk. I don't know what you call like that, that facial expression, but not because I found anything funny, but that smirk was like my kind of emotional overload. I would smile to kind of escape that emotional overload. Somebody give me a phrase here to describe this. A coping mechanism. There's a better phrase. And then a nervous tick, yeah. And so that's really horrible. And most of us have things like that when we're in really uncomfortable situations, the way we speak changes, our facial expressions change, and it's something for us to, think about. So yeah, anyways, we'd love to hear more people's responses to Toby, but let's go to Nick Hummel.
Well, in response to Toby, I'll say not only is that prevalent in the legal field, the medical field, but also in customer service, and more specifically in aviation. There's this, even though it's not as serious as having to tell someone you're going to jail for 25 years of your life, or telling someone you have 6 months to live, for people who are traveling, hearing the news that your luggage is delayed and the next direct flight to get your bag isn't until Saturday is almost as catastrophic. Or telling people, I'm sorry, it was your fault that you woke up late and you missed your check-in, the check-in time for your flight, and I can't do anything for you. There's a certain skill set, that same skill set that you learn. And so I do training for Phoenix Sky Harbor for the Air Canada contractor, Swissport. And that's one of the things that I have to train on, is how can you be compassionate, but also have that very blunt sort of doctor's bedside manner. Because out of all of my years in customer service, I've learned, one, you should never lie to people. Even if it's lying because you think it's going to make the situation better. That never helps. But you also shouldn't get someone's hopes up. I think that's equally as bad.
Great.
So
Nick,
for me,
sorry.
So for me, what I always say is you need to be realistic. You have to say, these are your options, A, B, C, and D. I understand that it's a very frustrating situation. I can't imagine how frustrated you are right now, but this is what we're able to do. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then you leave the space for the individual to feel whatever feelings they need to feel.
Great. So thank you, Nick. That's really powerful to remind us of the value of truth amidst, a service orientation, and that politeness doesn't mean, or bedside manner, or, being consoling and supportive doesn't mean hiding truth. And you tapped into my greatest existential dilemma as a teenager. Just kidding, it wasn't my greatest. It was, if you're a teenager, you have an existential dilemma like every 3 seconds. But I was a waiter at Ruby Tuesday. Never been a Ruby Tuesday? I was a waiter at Ruby Tuesday, and the person ordered fish. So I brought them fish. And I brought them the fish. He said, I ordered chicken. I said, no, you didn't. You ordered fish. They said, no, I want the chicken. I said, look, you ordered fish. I got it right here. And Ruby Tuesday said, no, the customer's always right. I say, the value of customer's always right doesn't trump the value of truth. So I think I had a disproportionate weighing of moral values for the service industry. But you're right. You have to speak truth and you have to be polite. But sometimes the customer's always right. Their truth outweighs the absolute truth. So Hannah, your hand was up and then it was down. Now it's back up. So good, Hannah. Hi.
Hello. A theme I keep hearing between everyone's shares, and I'm curious about this also, is the sense that it feels like what you were saying before, Rabbi Shmuly, was that words are constructive, and I guess I'm getting the sense between like dieting and all this other, and the way people speak to each other, it feels like if words are constructive, how are we to know which words to believe and which ones to not? It feels like because a lot of the, messaging you get from advertisements and from parents or whatever lead to negative outcomes, because those words, even if they're negative, are also constructive. So that's what I'm thinking about.
Oh, Hannah, so I want to understand a little bit more because it's such a powerful question. What I think I heard you say, but it doesn't get to the heart of it, is that there's so much speech around us, and how do we know which to kind of buy into? But I think you're saying one more layer on top of that.
Right, because the other layer is that because negative words seem to be equally constructive as positive words. And so in those instances, it's hard as a human to figure out which words are good for you.
Mm-hmm. So what would be an example of like negative words that you think would still be constructive? Like what's an example you have in mind?
Oh, okay, I'll just use a personal example. As someone who's approaching 30, I'm getting so many social media advertisements about Botox and like you could look more beautiful, everyone's doing this. Actually, it's empowerment to take control of your image in this very particular way. And that has outcomes. A lot of my friends have started these like micro procedures or whatever. And so that's just a personal
right. So there's like this false empowerment conversation. I don't know if you'd call it that, but around you're not enough, you can be more, and be your best you can be, which is really there's a kind of like the speech is like, you can be beautiful, you can be great, you can be rich, you can be everything you want to be, but the underlying foundation is you're not enough, like you're inadequate. You need to be fixed fundamentally, right? And so how do we separate out the kind of speech that truly is empowering and beautiful and constructive versus the one that has that unhealthy foundation? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and even parents saying you should be more like this person, or you need to be like this. It just seems like negative words also have a positive feedback loop. You can
Great, love that. Okay, so just before we go to Rabbi Lerner, do you want to respond to that or add a new comment? Okay, so I'm going to come back to you if you're not responding. Oh, you're on mute still anyways.
Okay. Sorry about that. No, it was not to that in particular, to an earlier comment. So if you
great. So let me come right back to you. Great. So we'll come right back to you after Hannah's great point. Yeah, I think we should keep the question alive, and for our conversation of like Hannah's asking a really great question. Like, there's not this binary of like, here's really great, constructive, healthy speech, and here's really clearly like evil, destructive speech. There's this middle ground of stuff that feels like it's trying to be affirmative and constructive and helpful. And yet there's some problematic natures to what's underlying some of it. And so I don't want to answer that as much as like amplify that important question for others to weigh in on. Okay, Rabbi Lerner, let's hear your response to the other thing.
Okay, the comment about self-comments I thought was very important. How many times do we do something and we say, oh, that was stupid? Those are negative self-images reinforcing in us our own self-image, when we ought to be saying, I guess there's a better way to do it.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in really quickly?
Please.
All right, so speaking about, I have answers to both Toby and Hannah, though, so just go to Hannah first, okay? Speaking about if you get Botox, you'll be empowered and stuff like that. One thing that I did learn when I was, 20 and, saying, okay, my life will be so much better. It'll solve all of my problems if I get down to 104 pounds. I will be so beautiful, and everything will just, anything that tells you that you need to change in order to be empowered, I treat with a lot of skepticism.
Oh, I want to give a counter argument.
Yes.
Okay, so a respectful counter argument.
No,
go
ahead.
So I love what you said. This notion of if I need to change myself to be empowered, right? That feels problematic. But let's think of some cases where we might think of it as less problematic. Now, let me take a big one. Let's say somebody identifies as trans and they want to take hormones or they want to engage in a surgery to change their body, right? To be empowered to their authentic self. Okay, that's one example. What about someone who was in a car accident and has a disfiguration, is that the right word? And wants to engage in a cosmetic surgery to fix this this damage? What about someone who you know, has well, this might, no, I'm not gonna use that example. Okay, so I think there's a few. What about someone who is obese? Someone who is obese and has medically been suggested to take all measures possible to, you know, not be perfect, but find ways to, you know, eliminate some of that weight. So I wonder
something this, okay, someone who's obese, who's trying to lose weight for their medical purpose, for medical purposes, I don't think of that as the same thing as Botox and, you know, it'll, you know, yeah, those are different. Yeah.
Yes,
you know,
that is a different category. I agree. Yeah.
And then also the like, but no, that's my point is that it's not going to make everything better for you. Like that's where you kind of have to be skeptical about it.
And I think also that's also part of going to the trans conversation. There's a lot of reason for depression and mental health challenges for trans folks that are socially connected. But I think part of it also is this false presentation that some give. Oh, once you've engaged in this hormonal treatment or the surgery, everything is good for you. You're now your perfect, authentic self. And even if it may be important for someone, and I'm not, you know, to engage in that, I think we should be careful of people presenting that, like, if you're not closeted, if you've engaged in a medical intervention, everything is going to be perfect for you. Just like if you weigh 150 pounds and now you weigh 130 or 200, now you're 180, everything is going to be perfect for you. No technical solution, you know, solves.
That's probably how I should have put it. That's actually what I meant. That's how I should have put it. I'm really sorry. I kind of speak stupidly sometimes. But anyway, though, okay, speaking of negative self-talk, okay? Anyway, though, but the other thing, though, that I wanted to say to Toby, so I've actually been in the situation with medical having to, it wasn't, my mom's a pediatrician and one of her patients had died. That summer I was working with pediatric oncology and everything, and I had to tell her. And then I actually carried that over to my teaching. Now, I have to get up in front of classes and show people pictures of all, you know, horrifying stuff. And I have to tell them, oh yeah, all these horrifying things happen. Do you know how resistant people are to actually hearing an honest story about history? They get so upset. They get so mad. They get, you know, like, that's why I've been called every name in the book. I've received threats from students. I've been stalked even by a student. It's really weird because actually the stalking incident with student, that actually happened because of anti-Semitism, but that's, you know, a different story. But anyway, but the only thing that I actually, what tied those two together was the day that I had to, you know, tell my mom her patient had died. She and I had a little bit of a conversation about like how it's every single situation, it's never actually going to get better. It's never going to be perfect. The only thing you can do is just, you know, do the best you can with that particular, it's like with that individual, it's going to be something completely different for another individual.
Yeah.
In my classroom, it's kind of the same way. On that day, I might, you know, I might be talking about, okay, why can't we have Confederate flags all over the place, even though I see them across the street, but why shouldn't we have Confederate flags all over the place? Yeah. I'm gonna, yeah. So maybe, awesome. Yeah. So,
thank you. So good. So thank you, Aglaia. And I want to leave our last 7 minutes for if there's some folks who haven't spoken yet, who also want to jump in. And I'll just share one thought prior, just how powerful role models are that shift the norms. I grew up on the basketball court where you trash talk, and just like Steve Shobin does on the pickleball court every day. He's trash talking everyone. Not just kidding, Steve. And so we trash talk. Now I wasn't not in an intense way, but basically like, you know, mild put downs of how you're going to school someone on the court, whatever. And then I moved to Israel, and I had a rabbi who used to play with us at the yeshiva. And this guy, every word out of his mouth, every 2 seconds was a compliment to someone. Great shot, great. And he was doing it for the opponent's side too. And I was so overwhelmed by it. And it really affected me in how I thought about like sports and what we're actually trying to do out there in a way it transformed my orientation of how we think about that. So anyways, just a little side point. Yes, hey Eddie.
Yeah, thank you, Rabbi. Something that I'm often conflicted by and it draws up a red flag is when people blur the lines of honesty and kindness, where they'll say, I'm brutally honest. And internally, they're more brutal than they are honest. And it ends up being something really hurtful and offensive. And I see this a lot with some folks who will use it as an excuse to say something really mean, like call out somebody's weight and be like, you're really big. And I'm just like, they'll like hide behind the fact and be like, I'm just being honest. And I really get red flags from people who use that and take a step back and maybe think about the way that they're saying things to be more kind. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Beautiful. I love that. This touches upon an earlier theme we were looking at of the value of shalom over emet at times. Peace over truth. We don't need to say everything we believe. There's no virtue to just pouring our toxic thoughts upon others, and that we should be skeptical. And that's why our tradition says that generally we shouldn't give tochacha, we shouldn't give rebuke, we shouldn't give moral correctives to others, because generally people cannot hear it and not take it. Today we're pouring our moral correctives out left and right. You should be better at that. You can fix that. You're blind. You don't understand this and that. And in a way that actually only adds heat and no light. And so the rabbis teach, of course, there is a machloket, a conflicting view here, but one of the views is that we should only do that where there's really love in place and the person truly can hear it. And one view says that is possible. That is possible today. Another view is that that's not possible today. And a third view is that we should say it even if it's not going to be received out of principle. So thank you for sharing that. And I think this whole notion today of like, yeah, being brutally honest as if that's a virtue is really problematic. It's really problematic. I mean, I do think we build trust when people share sensitive things that they feel like, when you do this, it really hurts me or it bothers me, right? But that's very different, right? Using, as we often say, using I language rather than you language. Here's how I feel when you say that, rather than you're mean, right? Or you don't speak nicely, right? I feel hurt when you say that, right? And so that's kind of the easiest relational advice. Okay, Rabbi Lerner, and then I see Nick. Is your hand up there, Rabbi?
I got it. In terms of behavioral modification, what you pointed out, and I think what we often forget, is positive reinforcement is constantly much more effective than punishment or negativism. It just doesn't work and it doesn't last.
Yep.
But positive works even in slow steps, baby steps. And if it's heavy from a very important person, even more so.
Yes, thank you for that. And now let me add one other thing that I've studied, and you tell me if you have a different understanding. It's that we should not say general positive reinforcements. The positive reinforcement should be connected to a specific behavior or pattern. You don't just say, oh, you're great. Oh, I love you. Like, you're wonderful. Say, oh, you were so great at what you did when you did X, Y, and Z. And I love how you said X, Y, and Z, right? We should, with children in particular, connect it to, now there is a conflicting argument. The conflicting suggestion is that it should never be connected to behaviors, but to being. We don't want to praise a child for something they do, because that implies they're only loved if they do that. But we want to praise them for their essence, for their being. In a sense, something they can't lose. And so they don't feel like I'm only loved if I continue to do X, Y, and Z. So I think about this. My 5-year-old daughter comes home with the kindness sticker. Do I say, oh, you're wonderful, I'm so proud of you because you got the kindness sticker? Or do I say, I love you, you're so wonderful because your kind nature, And so that's something for us to think about. How do we praise others? How do we give positive reinforcements? When is it specific? When is it general? When is it about being? When is it about doing? Yes, Rabbi.
And sometimes it pays to ask your 5-year-old daughter, what did you do or
Yes,
say
exactly. Yes.
that you got the sticker?
Yes.
And if she can identify it,
Right.
now you have a one-to-one relationship.
Yes, yes. And unfortunately, sometimes schools promote the kind of behavior that we wouldn't think as the highest form. What do they want her to be? A good little girl who's quiet. Oh, everyone else was loud and you were a good little girl sitting there quiet. Or what did you do? You cleaned up the room when no one else did, right?
Well, the other part of that is like Tochacha. I am convinced it's much more effective with students to say, would you mind waiting after class for a second? And then point out, you did this so wonderfully. I don't know whether you realize the other kids appreciated it. And at that point, you got wins.
Awesome. So I'm sorry, I know we have more hands up. We got to conclude. But next week, we're going to look at V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You should love your fellow as yourself. Love your fellow as yourself. You're all so wonderful. You're all so great and terrific. Whether you did nothing or did great things today, you're just so wonderful. Just kidding, just kidding. But thank you for being here. And no, seriously, your questions and thoughts are also thoughtful and wonderful. And even those of you who share a lot, they're wonderful. And those of you who sometimes don't share, your presence and your listening means a lot. And those of you go back and forth with sharing, and it's all wonderful. So really, thank you for being here and lifting up each other in this pursuit of kindness together. Have a wonderful
Kol tuv.
God bless. Kol tuv. Kol
Thank
tuv.
you.
God bless.